Hey everyone, this is Kandace and Sher with Processing Trauma Out Loud, back for another episode on why Sher and I think story work, as Sher just affectionately said last week, the bomb. Both Sher and I have spent several years now working with our own coaches, being in story work groups, and really noticing that this journey just keeps getting better for us.
Yeah.
We're getting freer. Cher talked about curses last week that we are seeing broken off of us, and the vows that we've released. And it's been a journey, Cher. And we also named last week, and I just want to mention this quickly. Story work is not the only healing modality that we use, but it is the foundational one for what we do with our clients.
Yeah. Yeah. And last week we talked a little bit about how the big thing about story work is that when we experience situations of trauma and harm, something in us shifts, something changes. And we then respond to those changes as though it is truth, and our life is changed going forward, often for decades, literally, until we are able to find a guide who can help us go back to those spaces. And last week, we just talked about the power of curses and agreements and vows to not only cause these negative shifts or these harmful shifts in us, these shifts that steal, kill, and destroy our glory and our freedom as carefree, innocent, beautiful children, but then how we are stuck in that. And yeah. And so yeah, that was a very powerful episode, I felt. And we wanted to just come back and talk a little bit more about what are some of the other things that can cause shifts that we want to keep our eyes open to when we're thinking about our stories of harm.
Mhm. Yeah. So I know last week we talked about that shift for me when I was a little girl and how that impacted really decades of my life. I do want to say, for many, many of those adult years, it looked like I was doing just fine. I'm a worker bee.
Yeah.
And so I knew how to do things, but I'm curious, Cher, if you can name anything about where you noticed a shift for you in uh, realizing the developmental trauma that you grew up with.
I'll name something that I've been coming to terms with very recently, and that is one of the things that we want to look at when we look at our stories of harm is what are themes? What are types of situations that come up over and over? And for me, one of the themes that comes up when I go back and I think about my stories of harm that stand out to me is the theme of violence.
Mhm.
And I experienced a lot of violence in just a variety of ways. And I'm even redefining, like even ignoring severe emotional neglect is a violent to a young child, literally violent. But then the ways that we are maybe physically assaulted or verbally assaulted or sexually assaulted, this is violence, and it has taken me a long time to come to a place where I am saying, I have I have themes of violence in my stories that I've never really looked at in quite the same way that I am looking at now. And I think for me, violence caused profound shifts in the ways that I experienced life, particularly the fact that I think I just did not feel safe ever. I think I was always hyper vigilant, afraid of rocking the boat, afraid of, looking over my shoulder like what's coming and being flinching and guarding and always trying to be prepared for the fact that I knew I was in a place where I could not stop it, and how could I endure it? Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh, I know your stories,
Yeah.
and I know that little girl who suffered at the hands of violence in multiple ways, but definitely physically.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that the shifts for that little girl, and I don't know maybe how old you were when they very first began. I'm thinking it probably pre-verbal.
Yeah.
But I think I have a question. Like, how did that affect her worth?
Yeah.
How did that affect her sense of self-worth?
Yeah. I remember when I shared the probably I think it was the first story that I ever shared in story group, and I had been punished severely for doing something wrong. And I remember the question being asked, what do you think you did wrong? And I said, well, I'm not really sure what it was, but it was really bad. And I think that I went through my life feeling that I always did things wrong, that there
Mhm.
was this standard that somehow I had to figure out. And so I became extremely analytical about reading the room, about always being ready and hyper vigilant and watching for the very minute gestures in the powerful people in the room, and making sure that I was ready for what was going to come, because I would eventually do something wrong, and and the outcome would be severe.
Yeah. I'm feeling elevated right now. Like it feels like on my chest, it just feels I feel stress
Yeah.
because what did it mean if you perceived that you did something wrong?
Yeah. Well, that I was bad, that I was um, all the names that I was called: stupid, a dumb shit, all the names. Like, I was that, right? Because I mean, I literally couldn't figure out how to bring the right kind of hammer that was asked for, right? I mean, or whatever the demand was to go do something and get this right now, but without guidance of what it was that was even being asked for. And inevitably, I would bring the wrong thing. And so then the lashing, the name calling, the violence that would result. So yeah, I think I felt that I was stupid, that no matter how hard I tried, I would screw it up.
Yeah. Is that where the vows connected to this striving to make sure that you never do anything wrong?
That I don't do anything wrong, and also that everybody in the room is being taken care of. I think this is the responsibility that I carried even more, was that I had
As
to,
a child.
as a child, I had to be so watchful that everybody was okay. And the minute that I caught the nuance of somebody being dysregulated, I had to be on top of it so that the explosion would not come.
Yeah. I'm I'm just seeing her in a living room right now, and trying to manage and keep not only herself safe, but everyone.
Yeah.
And here's what I want to say. I see that little girl and I'm just wondering, I think we have listeners who are really relating to you right now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I want to kind of shift into because we could really go back into your story right now and do some story work because I want to do that, but I know you've had a lot of care.
Yeah.
Um, so
I'm
I want
good.
to.
I'm good. I will say thank
Okay,
you, and
I'm wanting to care for you.
I'm very comfortable to move forward. Yep, I'm good.
Okay, and I want to kind of talk about that shift for
Yeah.
you,
Mhm.
because we're really kind of this is a part two from last week.
Yeah.
of the curses and the vows that come from
Yeah.
shifts that happened in trauma.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for the way that then when we experience that kind of shift, it sets us up for other shifts. Like, and I will just, I want to name a couple of other things. And we've talked about some of these things in the past, but how triangulation, how when one of our parents establishes a relationship with us that is closer to them or more connected or more loving or serving, that we are closer to that parent than they are to their spouse or even to other adults. They draw us into a triangle where that other adult is further away emotionally from them than we are. Triangulation is very hard and it is a very subtle, it can be very subtle because we are ushered into these places of honor and of feeling chosen and of having power. And yet there can be immense shame also. And even we can be targeted by our siblings for being, the one who gets certain privileges or is
The
honored in
golden
some way.
child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So triangulation can bring huge shifts when that happens in the life of a child.
Yeah. And I just want to say a child cannot and should not have to hold the emotional distresses, dysregulations of the parent. And I also am saying that with great understanding and compassion that if
Yeah.
you notice that you turn to your child, this is our invitation to notice.
Yeah.
Because even though your child may be very good at taking care of you,
Yeah.
it's actually not their responsibility.
Yeah.
And yeah, we want to teach our children to be compassionate and want to help people. We're not talking about that. I used to take my kids to a nursing home and we would sing and play guitar, and that was a good way to care for people. It's not a child's responsibility to take care of the deep emotional problems and pain of the parent.
Right. And so often only to have the child to have their own needs be neglected because they are put in the role of caring for and being the one that the parent turns to rather than the child being able to turn toward the parent. I want to name another thing that I think is very powerful in causing shifts. Um, a couple of them. When we dissociate,
Mm,
and that often happens in trauma when the child is experiencing things that consciously are too heavy to bear. And so the child leaves their body to some extent. They're there, they may look very present, but they have gone into hypoarousal. Their body has shut down. Maybe they have gone into a freeze mode or a collapse mode. They're there and they can even look present, but their prefrontal cortex has gone offline and they often cannot even remember what happened. And we can have times, we can even have years of our lives that we cannot remember our stories. I know for me, for many years, it was very hard for me to remember anything before I was 12 years old. And I know now that I was in a highly dissociated state during those years just to survive. So dissociation brought a huge shift in my life in the ways that I could and could not even relate to the people in my world.
yeah. Yeah. In that place of disassociation for a child, where they forget and then, a lot of time I heard someone say, sometimes we can show up saying, "Oh, my childhood was wonderful." And that can kind of be a clue, like you've probably forgotten some things. And not that you try to tell someone that they've had trauma if they haven't, but there is this sense of, and here's kind of the data. If they are in constant patterns of whatever that looks like, whether it's addiction, anger, um, avoidance, powering up and always wanting to be in control. Let's just slow down a little bit and say, yes, I feel like I had a wonderful childhood. And why are these life patterns? But it's just a simple question. No judgment, no shame, but we want to bring some congruence to the journey here.
Yeah, and explore the why behind our behavior. We've been in situations where the what of our behavior became the big thing, where we experienced so much judgment and condemnation. But, do you remember a time when somebody paused and paused long with you and sat with you to uncover the why? You know, I yeah, I I
Well,
could go on a
share.
rant about this.
Well, share when you assume that
Yeah,
the why is because you're this bad, dangerous, terrible sinner.
yeah,
That's the only reason
yeah,
or the reason. What
yeah.
more is there to talk about except to feel like literally feel like you have a weight on you that you could never get off? And I know I got fired up. We only have 2 more minutes here, but
I'm fired up too. And because
let's
I
get
want to make this
into
comment about I want to make a comment and then we're going to have to close about rebellious teenagers. I know the hormonal thing is huge. I get that. I understand the dynamics of that. And I do think that that is a part of it. But there is a lot more why
yeah,
behind any actions of rebellion that are ongoing. And if we can pause and if we can turn toward our teenagers who are struggling and move toward them with care and openness, they might not be ready right now, but there are stories.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
And I want to say, I know of a few teenagers doing story work.
yeah,
I know they're only teens. Oh my God, I would have loved to have had a story work coach, but it's not too soon.
yeah, I know. It's not. And this is so worthy, Kandace. I think we're setting the stage again for why is story work important. And we've been focused on when we experience trauma and harm, something shifts in us and it changes the direction of our lives. And we're just naming a few of the things that can cause those shifts.
Yeah.
And it's important and it's so good, Kandace. And just thanks for
Thank you.
being willing to go to these hard places in your life and with me and with so many others.
Thank you, Cher, for doing the same. Love you, friend.
Love you too.